Getting started. If you're a developer who needs to learn how to quickly build a Qlik Sense application, this tutorial is for you. My goal here is simple: to guide you to build a fully functioning Qlik Sense application using real data in just a few hours. Now, it's possible to build a smaller application in half an hour or less, but we're going to go deeper. We're going to use real data, we're going to use multiple chart types, and we're going to create multiple sheets. We're also going to be writing some code. Now, I've built this application to be fun and engaging, so, if you like, you can skip steps or do them out of order. I've also included the finished application for you to look at, see Auto Tutorial, and an extended application to show you what's possible, which is automotive. The dataset we'll be using is real automotive data that I've taken from multiple sources. Let's get started. Creating the application. To start Qlik Sense, double-click on the Qlik Sense icon. Now, when it starts, it will show you a screen like this one here. Qlik Sense starts with a welcome message superimposed on the hub that shows the applications available to you. You will probably have a different set of applications available to you than the ones shown here. Click Create a new app to create an app. You'll be prompted for a name. I called my app Auto, but you can call yours anything you want. Click on Create, and when the app has been created, click Open App. We've now created an empty app, so let's add the first of our data. Loading data from files, Part 1. You can drag and drop data files into Qlik Sense, and it will automatically create a script and read in the data files. Now, that's fine for beginners, but as developers, we might need a much finer control over our data. So, for example, we might need to merge, rename, edit, or delete fields. In this tutorial, we'll show you the outlines of how you can cleanse your data. Qlik Sense has many more editing functions than we'll be able to cover here, but at least we'll give you an introduction to get you started. So, let's add some data the developer way. Click on the navigation icon, which is this icon in the top left of the Qlik Sense window. From this menu, choose Data Load Editor. Now, this puts us in the Data Load Editor, which we'll use to import and clean up data. We'll use this editor and explore how it works step by step. Qlik Sense automatically generates some settings for us which govern things like date and time formatting. Now, we don't need to change any of these settings, but we will be adding some things to the script, so we need to ensure the script is added in the right place. Before proceeding, make sure you've put the cursor in the edit box at the bottom of the script. We want to connect to data in files, so, unsurprisingly, our first step is to define a data connection to connect us to files. On the top right of the Qlik Sense window, under Data Connections, click on the Create New Connection button and click on Folder. This tells Qlik Sense we're creating a new data connection and that the data will be files in a folder. So now we need to tell Qlik Sense where our data is. The installer put all of the files you need for this project under the Qlik folder. The Qlik folder is under My Documents. Under the Qlik folder, the data files are located in Sense, Tutorials, Qlik Sense Developer, Data Sources. Now, this is the path to these files on my machine, but it will be different on your machine. On the Create New Data Connections folder dialog, navigate to the Qlik Sense Tutorials, Qlik Sense Developer, Data Sources folder. We'll name this connection Auto Data. Click Save to save the new connection. We set up a named connection, so now we just need to read in the data by selecting a data file and selecting data within the file. Let's start by selecting the file. Look under the Auto Data connection and click on the Select Data icon. The Select File dialog will appear. Click on World Vehicle Data.xlsx and click Select. We've now chosen a file, and Qlik Sense presents us with the Select Data dialog where we can choose what data we want to load into our application. Here's what you should see. Each of the columns in the World Vehicle Data.xlsx file is shown in the Select Data dialog. The columns, or the field names, are all highlighted in orange. Now, if we wanted to, we could turn off a column and not load its data simply by unticking the box by the column or the field name. The Excel column names will become field names in Qlik Sense, and it's possible that we might want to change the names in Qlik Sense. To change the names, all we have to do is type the new name in the field names highlighted in orange. At the bottom of the dialog is the script Qlik Sense will generate to load the data. We can change the script later if we want to. Now, we want all of the data in this data set, so don't change anything at all. Click on the Insert Script button on the bottom right of the window. And this inserts the script automatically where we put our cursor, which is after the set settings. Now, let's load the data. On the top right of the window, click on the Load Data button. You'll see the Data Load Progress dialog, which will report on the progress of the load. Now, for a small data set like this, it doesn't really make much difference, but for larger data sets, this dialog will enable you to track what's happening and to diagnose errors using the trace command. When the load has finished, click on Close. Now, with simple data sets like this, there's a faster way to load it into Qlik Sense, but we've taken the longer path here to introduce you to a more powerful way of controlling your data. Later on in this tutorial, I'll show you how to edit this script to do more interesting things. Your first chart, a line chart. We've got some data, so let's plot our first chart. First, we need to go to the app overview. Click on the navigation icon on the top left of the window and choose App Overview. You'll now be shown the sheets in our application. Qlik Sense displays charts on sheets. An application will typically have many sheets with several charts per sheet. So, the most fundamental step in building an application's visualizations is to start with the sheets. So that's what we'll do now. Here's the app overview window that you should see. This window shows all of the sheets in the application, which right now are none. We're going to create a new sheet, so click on Create New Sheet. There are two places in the window where you can do that. Either will do. You'll now be prompted for a title for the sheet and a description. I used Vehicle Sales as the title and an overview of worldwide vehicle sales as the description, but you can use any text you like. The title will be used across the top of the new sheet and in the app overview, where we are now. You can change the title and the description later. To view our new sheet, click on the sheet icon. You'll be presented with a blank screen that says, "The sheet is empty." We're going to add charts to this sheet, so to start editing the sheet, click on the Edit icon on the top right of the window, which puts us into edit mode. Edit mode is where we'll be adding all of our charts and all of our visualizations. Now, there's quite a lot on this edit sheet and we're going to be using lots of its features, so we're going to take a minute or so to explain what some of the icons on this sheet do. On the bottom right of the window, you'll see the Properties icon. If you click it, it'll show you the properties of the currently selected item. Click it now, and you'll see the properties of the sheet itself, which are title and description. This is one of the ways you can change the name and the description of a sheet. Leave the Properties pane showing on the screen because we're going to need to use it soon. At the bottom right of the window, you'll see the Undo and Redo icons. Undo and Redo work in exactly the same way as every other piece of software you've ever used. On the bottom of the window, there's a group of editing icons. So these are Cut, Copy, Paste and Delete. And again, they work in exactly the way that you expect them to. On the bottom left, you'll see the Assets icon. This shows and hides the visualization assets. Assets are things like chart types, fields, and master items. Now, we need to use these items, so we need to be able to see them, so make sure the Assets pane is shown. The Assets pane is on the left-hand side of the window. This shows the visualization assets we can add to our sheet. We can add charts to sheets by dragging and dropping the chart types from the Charts tab, and we're going to be doing this very soon. The Assets pane has three tabs: Charts, Fields, and Master Items. We'll be using all of these tabs as we go through the tutorial, but for now we're going to concentrate on just one of them, which is the Charts tab. Take a second to have a look at the available chart types. These are all the built-in chart types, but of course using the Extensions API we can add more chart types to Qlik Sense. We're going to plot a line chart with year along the horizontal axes and sales on the vertical axes. So let's add our chart. Click on the line chart icon and drag it onto the sheet. By default, the chart will take up the whole of the screen. Now, we're going to change that a little bit later, but leave it as it is right now. So, your Qlik Sense window should look something like this. Now we need to add a dimension and a measure to our chart. Click on Add Dimension. This brings up a dialog box showing you all of the available fields you can use as the dimension. Now, these are all of the fields that we read in from our Excel file earlier. From the list, choose Year. For our measure, we want to plot sales versus year, but first we need to consider what we mean by sales. If we look at our original Excel file, we see something like this. Car sales are listed by territory and by year. If we plot out sales versus year, what do we actually mean? Do we want the average sales per territory, or the sum of sales over all territories, or perhaps the largest sales in any territory, or something else? Well, in this case, we want the sum of all sales over all territories, but this won't always be the case. And in fact, a little later on, we're going to see an example where we're going to use the average value. Now that we know what we want, let's go back to our chart and click on Add Measure. Select car sales. In the aggregation menu, choose Sum Car Sales. Now, unsurprisingly, for each year, this gives us the sum of all car sales over all territories. This chart shows car sales over time, and it's your first chart. Now, we're going to be customizing this chart in the next section of this tutorial to make it look the way that we want. But before we do that, we're going to add some more data to it. We're going to add a line showing commercial vehicle sales. So commercial vehicle sales is one of the fields we read in from our Excel file. To add a new line, we're going to go back to the Assets pane and add the field Commercial Vehicle Sales. On the Assets pane, click on the Fields icon to bring up the list of fields that you've loaded in. Now, about halfway down the list, you'll see Commercial Vehicle Sales. We want to add it as a new line to our chart, so right-click on Commercial Vehicle Sales. This will bring up a new dialog box. We want to add the field to the chart, so click on Add to Visualization. Because we're adding it as a measure, click on Add as Measure and choose Sum as the aggregation. This adds commercial vehicle sales in exactly the same way as we added car sales. Your chart should look something like this. On the top left of the window, you'll see the Save button. Click on it to save your work. Customizing your line chart. In this section, I'll show you how to make a chart look the way you want it to. I'm going to give you specific instructions, but you should take a little time to investigate what other options are available to you. On the right of the window, you'll see the Properties pane for our chart. We're going to use this pane to control the appearance of our chart. Depending on the size of your window, some of the options may scroll off the bottom of the window. In this case, you'll see a light grey scroll bar to the right of the Properties pane. Now, you might need to scroll up and down to see some of the options we're going to use. The first thing we'll do is suppress the zeros on our chart. Click on Add-ons and click on Data Handling. Untick the Show Zero Values box. Notice how the chart updates immediately when you make a change. Now, this is the case when you change any of the chart settings. As soon as you make your change, the chart updates. For these two lines, I'd like to show the data points themselves rather than just the lines. Click on Appearance, then Presentation. Tick the Show Data Points box. As soon as you tick the box, the data points are added to the chart. Now, we have two lines on our chart, but we haven't provided a way for people using our chart to tell them apart. So, we'll add a legend and we'll position the legend at the top of the chart. Click on Appearance and then Colours and Legend, and again you might have to use the scroll bar. Turn the legend to Auto and set the position to be top. Untick Show Legend Title. This puts the legend at the top of the chart and doesn't display the Measures text. Now, the chart's looking a lot more like the way that I want it to, but the axes labels aren't as helpful as they could be. The numbers on the vertical axes aren't quite in the format I want, and there's no title. So, let's fix these things now. Click on Measures and click on Sum Car Sales. Change the label to Car Sales. This changes what's displayed on the chart on both the axes and in the legend. Change the number formatting to number. On the drop-down menu under Simple, choose 1000. This adds a 1000 separator and suppresses the decimal point. After all, you can't sell a fraction of a new car. So, we'll do the same for some commercial vehicle sales. This time, change the label to Commercial Vehicle Sales, but make all the other changes as before. Lastly, we need to add a title. On the top left of the chart it says Click to Add Title. So, click and add the title Vehicle Sales by Year. Click on Save. You should now see a chart that looks something like this. Qlik Sense makes some judgments about how to display a chart, but no tool is psychic. As developers, we need to be able to take control and display a chart in exactly the way that we want it to. In this section, I've given you an introduction on how you can do that. Repositioning your line chart. We're going to add more charts to the sheet, so we need to make a little room. To resize and move our line chart, click on the orange arrow marks and drag the chart borders to where you want. Resize the chart so it takes up only the top left-hand corner of the sheet. Adding a pie chart. We know how sales have varied over time, but which territories or countries are the big car buying nations? We're going to use a pie chart to find out. We need to bring up the list of available charts, so click on the Charts icon on the Assets pane. From the list of charts, click on Pie Chart and drag it to an empty space on the right-hand side of the sheet. Click on Add Dimension and select Territory Code. Click on Add Measure and choose Car Sales. But why not use the search option to locate car sales? Instead of scrolling down, type car in the search box and choose the car sales option that appears. On the aggregation menu, choose Sum Car Sales. Your chart should look like this. Now, this is a reasonable chart, but we can customize it to make it look the way that we want it to. Let's start by turning the pie into a donut. In the Properties pane, click on Appearance and then Presentation. Click on Donut. Our chart has the dimension labelled Territory Code on it. Now, in most cases that's fine and it makes sense to show the label, but here it's kind of unnecessary because it's fairly obvious what the dimensions are. So, let's turn the dimension label to Off. Lastly, we need to set the title. Click to Add Title and set the title to Car Sales by Territory. We're going to add more charts to the sheet, so shrink the pie chart so it fits in the top right-hand corner of the sheet. Click on Save. Now your pie chart should look something like this. Master items and avoiding repetition. We've created two charts, both of which show some car sales. In software development, this kind of manual repetition can introduce errors, and quite frankly, it's boring. Can't we define quantities like some car sales and use them over and over again? Well, that's what the Master Items menu is for, and that's what we're going to use right now. Before we start, we need to make sure we haven't selected the pie chart. Many Qlik Sense actions are context sensitive, and we don't want to be working in the context of a selected chart. Click on any blank space on the sheet to deselect your chart. Looking around, no chart should be highlighted in orange. Now, on the left-hand side of the window, you should see the Assets pane. To bring up the list of available master items, click on the Master Items icon. There are 3 types of master items: dimensions, measures, and visualizations. We'll be adding dimensions and measures in this tutorial, and you can experiment with adding visualizations on your own. Right now, there are no master items, so we're going to add them. We can add master items from this menu, but it's actually easier to do it from the Fields pane. To see what fields we have in our application, click the Fields icon. Here's the list of fields you should see at this point. Some of these are dimensions and some are measures. Territory code and year seem like dimensions, and frankly the other quantities seem like measures. So let's make year and territory code dimensions. Right-click on year and select Create Dimension. This brings up the Create New Dimensions dialog. Here we can specify and explain the dimensions we're adding. In this case, year is pretty self-explanatory, but I've added some text as an example of what you can do. Click on Add Dimension. Stay in this dialog box, but click on Territory Code in the field list on the left-hand side. Add territory code as a dimension in the same way as before. This time I added the description ISO 31661 Alpha 3 territory code. Click on Add Dimension, then Done. We've added 2 dimensions, and the Master Items Dimension section should look something like this. We're going to add measures, but this time the process is a little bit more complicated. Go back to the Fields pane and right-click on Car Sales. Choose Create Measure. This brings up the Create New Measures dialog. We're going to do a bit more here. At the top of the dialog, it asks us to enter the expression. Here we want sum brackets car sales. Now, this is a simple calculation, and we could have had a much more complex expression involving several fields. We'll leave the name as car sales, and for the description we'll enter sum of all car sales. Before you continue, make sure you've entered the data exactly as it appears here. Especially check you've entered the correct expression. Click on Create. We need to add some more measures for later steps in the tutorial, which we'll do now. Here's how the measures list should look when you're done. Now, do we have to add master items? No, we don't have to add them at all. But if you do reuse the same measures or dimensions over and over again, it makes it easier, faster, and less error-prone to add them as master items. A pie chart with master items. We'll now use the master items to illustrate how they can speed up the chart creation process. We'll create another pie chart, but this time we'll look at commercial vehicle sales by territory. Reposition your existing pie chart so it takes up the top right-hand corner of the sheet. On the Assets pane, select Charts and drag and drop the pie chart icon onto the bottom right of the sheet. Click on Add Dimension and choose Territory Code from the list of dimensions. Click Add Measure and choose Commercial Vehicle Sales from the measures list. This time we didn't have to select an aggregation because we've already done that when we created the master item. Your chart should look like this. We're going to customize it a little. On the Properties pane, click on Appearance, then Presentation. Click Donut and set the dimension label to Off. On the pie chart, click on Click to Add Title and add the title Commercial Vehicle Sales by Territory. Your chart should look like this. Click on Save on the top left of the screen. The pattern of sales for cars and commercial vehicle sales are very different. It seems like countries are buying cars and commercial vehicles in quite different ways. because we built the two pie charts in isolation, you'll notice that different colours are allocated to the same country. We're going to fix that later using some of the principles of good visual design. Loading data, part 2. Our charts are interesting, but we could make them more interesting by adding more data. For example, it would be good to look at sales by region of the world. For that, we need to know which territories are in which region, so we need more data. We're going to be reading in data from this file territories.xlsx, but this file isn't as neatly formatted as our previous example, and we're going to have to do more to read in the data properly. The Excel file territories.xlsx is in the same folder as the world vehicle data.xlsx file we loaded in earlier. Here are the first few lines of the territories file. Let's add this file. On the top left of the screen, click on the navigation menu and choose Data Load Editor. Now, if you're prompted to save your work, make sure you save it. This will put us in the Data Load Editor script. In the edit window, put the cursor at the bottom of the script. Now, on my edit window, this is line 3132. We need to get the data from the territories.xlsx file, so under Data Connections and under Autodata, click on Select Data. This brings up the Select File dialog. We want to load the territories.xlsx file, so click on it and click Select. Note that the dialog opened in the same folder as before because we pointed the Autodata connection at that folder. The Select Data dialog should look like this. Now, plainly, this isn't the right format and we're going to need to make some changes. Firstly, the field names aren't right. They say things like data source, F2, F3, etc. when we want names like English short name or OICA region. The problem is there are header lines in the file that we need to discard, and we might need to tell Qlik Sense that the field names are embedded in the spreadsheet. To tell Qlik Sense to ignore the header lines, increase the header size count. The header size is at the top middle of the dialog box. In this case, we need to make it 7. We might need to tell Qlik Sense that the field names are embedded. On the Field Names drop-down box on the top centre of the dialog, select Embedded Field Names. On your system, that might already be selected. This gives us the correct field names as shown below, but we still need to make changes. We need to link the data in the spreadsheet to the data we've already loaded. To link data, we need a common field between the datasets. In the dataset we loaded previously, there's a field called territory code that contains the 3-letter ISO 31661 territory codes. Here, we have a field that's called ISO 31661 Alpha 3. Although they have different names, they contain the same data. We can link the data using this field, but we have to give the field the same name in both datasets. We'll rename the field ISO 31661 Alpha 3 to be territory code, which frankly is a much nicer name anyway. To rename the field, click on ISO 31661 Alpha 3 in the field names highlighted in orange and type in territory code to overwrite the existing field name. Now, there are also some other fields in this data we don't want to load. We won't be using calling code, for example. Untick calling code, which means calling code won't be loaded. Click on Insert Script. Here's what you should see on the screen. When you clicked on Insert Script, the new script was added where you place the cursor, in this case at the bottom of the file. Now I want to draw your attention to one line in particular. In the new script there's the line ISO 31661 Alpha 3 as territory code, which was added because we renamed the spreadsheet field ISO 31661 Alpha 3 as territory code. The way to read this line is read in the field ISO 31661 Alpha 3 from the spreadsheet, but rename it territory code in Qlik Sense. You'll notice there are quotation marks surrounding fields in the script. We use these whenever there is a space in the field name. I've just shown you how to rename a field in the Select Data dialog, But what if you want to rename a field later on? We're going to manually rename a field in the script. The field English short name is the English language short name of the territory. Let's rename it territory name. Change the English short name line to English short name as territory name. So here's our code. Renaming is as simple as using the word as. We have our script, so let's load the data. On the top right of the window, click on Load Data. When the Load Data dialog has finished, click on Close. What have I loaded? The data model. We've now loaded data from two spreadsheets and we've attempted to link them using a common field. How can we check that what we've done is correct? How do we check that we've actually linked these two different data sets? We're going to use the Data Model Viewer to check on the data. On the top left of the screen, click on the navigation menu and choose Data Model Viewer. You should see something similar to this. The Data Model Viewer shows us the relationship between tables and fields we've read in. Each time we read in data from a different file, it was read into a different table. The table names territories and world vehicle data were taken from the underlying spreadsheets. We can change these names in the script, and we'll see how to do that later. To see the fields, click on the little symbol on the bottom right-hand corner of the table and drag it to resize the box. You can reposition the boxes on the screen by dragging and dropping the boxes, and you can zoom in and zoom out on them using the zoom control on the right. As we can see, there's one link between tables, the territory code. Because this is a key field linking tables, it has a little key icon by it. This looks like the kind of data model we want, but what about the underlying data? Is the underlying data okay? To see the data, click on one of the tables so it's highlighted in bright orange, and then click on the preview bar at the bottom of the window. This shows you a preview of the contents of the fields in the table you've selected. Empty cells are indicated by a line. Large-scale applications might use data from many sources and combine them to create a complex data model. In these cases, the Data Model Viewer becomes very important to diagnose problems and to understand what's going on. Adding more master items. We've added a new data set, so to save time later, we'll add more dimensions and more measures. On the navigation menu, choose App Overview, then click on Vehicle Sales. Click Edit. On the Assets pane, click on Fields and right-click on Area Kilometres Squared. Choose Create Measure and fill in the dialog box as I've shown here. Click on Create to create the new measure. Add population and GDP as measures in the same way. Now we'll add the field OICA region as a dimension. Right-click on OICA region and choose Create Dimension. On the Create New Dimension dialog box, in the description box, enter something like the region of the world as used by OICA. Click on Add Dimension and then Done. Click on Save. Using the new data, adding a region bar chart. We've added new data, which includes region data, so let's add a bar chart to show vehicle sales by region. We have two data tables. Sales figures are in one table, listed by year and by territory code. The other table is lists of countries by territory code and by region. Qlik Sense can link this data across tables to show us sales by region. On the Assets pane, click Charts and drag and drop bar chart onto an empty space on your sheet. On the chart, click on Add Dimension and choose OICA region. Now click on Add Measure and choose Car Sales. You should have something like this. This is part of what we want, but we'd also like to have commercial vehicle sales on the chart as well as car sales. There are a couple of different ways that we could do this, and we're going to use one of them now. Go back to the Assets pane and select Master Items. Click on Measures. Under Master Items, click on Measures Now right-click on Commercial Vehicle Sales and select Add to Visualization. The next dialog box is asking us if we want to add commercial vehicle sales or replace car sales. We want to add it, so click on Add. Here's what you should have now. This is a bar chart of vehicle sales, both commercial and car, by region. Adding new measures to visualizations can be done in just a few mouse clicks. As before, this chart doesn't look quite the way we want it to. So, rather than me telling you exactly what to click, why don't you look on the screen and see how I do this? See how I make the chart title Vehicle Sales by Region. See how I set the measures to a number format that uses 1000 separated with no decimal places. See how I set a legend at the top of the chart that doesn't show the chart title. I am, however, going to show you how to do one last thing. The y-axis, which is the vertical axis, is scaled 0 to 300 million, with steps at 100 million and 200 million. I'd like to see a narrower scale. Click on Appearance, then y-axis, car sales, commercial vehicle sales. Now you'll probably have to use the scroll bar to see it. Set the scale to narrow. Click on Save. Your chart should now look something like this. Selecting data using filters. We have 4 charts now, but how might a user select a year, territory or region? We're going to add some filter boxes to do just that, but first you need to make some room for them on the right hand side of your sheet. Make sure no visualizations are selected highlighted before you do the next steps. If you have a visualization highlighted, the wrong menus will appear. Click on Fields in the Assets pane. Right-click on Year and choose Add to Sheet. Qlik Sense will automatically add a year filter box to the sheet. We have 2 more filter boxes to add, so you need to shrink the filter box so it takes up less space. Make sure your new filter box is not selected or highlighted before you do the next steps. If it is highlighted, you won't be able to add new fields as new filters. If you make a mistake, remember the undo buttons. Add territory code and OICA region as filters. You should now have 3 filter boxes that look something like this. Click Save. Let's pause to recap what we've done so far. We've loaded in 2 data files, one of which wasn't quite in the format we wanted, and we've linked them using a common field name. We've looked at the data model in the data model viewer and verified that the data model is indeed correct. We've created a new sheet for our application and we've added 4 charts to it. Finally, we've added 3 filters so the user can select data. This is a substantial amount of output in a very short space of time. If you want, you can take a break and have a look at the automotive application, which gives you an indication of what you can do with Qlik Sense. In the next sections, we're going to add more data, create a scatter plot, and have some fun with images. Loading data, part 3. We're going to add the last of our data files, a text file, and we're going to alter the load script by hand. The data we're going to load is the length of the road network in different countries. As before, click on the navigation icon and choose Data Load Editor. In the Edit window, put the cursor at the bottom of the file. On my computer, this is line 49. Under Auto Data, click on Select Data and choose countryroads.txt from the Select File dialog. The Select Data dialog looks different from before because we're loading in data from a text file, not a spreadsheet. We have extra lines that are not data at the start of the file. These are called header lines. Because we have a header in the text file, the field names aren't right. Set the header size to 1 and choose Embedded Field Names under Field Names. Now, we don't want all of this data. In fact, the only data that we want is territory code and roadways kilometres. Untick the boxes by rank, country and year of estimate. Now, click Insert Script. you should see these lines at the bottom of your script. This will load in data from the countryroads.txt file and will give us the length of the roadways in kilometres. But let's say that we want the length of the roadways in miles as well. What can we do? Well, one solution is to work out a kilometres to mile conversion when we're visualising the data. Or we could create a new field to hold the length in miles. Here, we're going to do the conversion in the script. We're going to add in a new field and we're going to calculate it from the kilometre data. Here's the line to add after territory code. Here's what this line does. It takes the field roadways kilometre and multiplies every value by 0.6214, which is the kilometres to miles conversion. And it puts the result into a new field called roadways brackets miles. The comma tells the interpreter there's another line to come. Here's how the last few lines of your script should look. In general, this is how we manipulate data in Qlik Sense. Load the data by clicking on the Load Data button on the top right of the window. Let's have a look at the data model. To see the data model, click on the navigation menu and choose Data Model Viewer. Here's the data model on my computer after I've rearranged things slightly. The different groups of data are called tables, and each table has a name. Here they're territories, country roads, and world vehicle data. The names comes from the files we read in, but we're going to override the names in a minute. The tables are linked by one field called territory code. So everything looks good here, so let's go back to the data load editor one last time, which is navigation, then data load editor. Sometimes the default table names are great, but other times they aren't. I like to take control and call the tables what I want. To give a table a name, we put the name inside square brackets before the load statement and terminate the statement with a colon. I'm going to call the first table Global Vehicle Data. The second table I'm going to call Territory Information. And the last table I'm going to call Road Data. Let's save these changes before we load. Click on the Save button on the top left of the window. On the top right hand of the window, click on Load Data. If you go back to the Data Model Viewer, you'll see the tables have been renamed. In this section, I've shown you how you can select data, rename fields, create fields, and rename tables. I've given you an introduction to how you can act on the contents of fields to create new fields. I've also shown you the Data Model Viewer where you can see the tables and fields in your model and how they're connected. Adding master items again. We've added this new field called roadways miles, and we're going to need it as a measure a little later. Go back to editing our vehicle sales app. On the Assets pane, click on Fields, then right-click on Roadways Miles. Now click on Create Measure. Make the expression average, which is AVG, roadways miles, and change the name to average roadways length brackets miles. I added the description average length of roadways in miles. To add the measure, click on Create. Click on Save. A new sheet, a scatter plot, and a pie chart. Is it true that countries that have the longest road network have the most cars? Are there countries that stand out? We're going to find out by creating a scatter plot on a brand new sheet in our application. Go to the navigation menu and choose App Overview. You should see something like this. Click on Create New Sheet. Now there are two places where you can do it, either one will do. Give the new sheet the title Cars, Roadways and Territories. For my description I have Cars in Use versus Roadways in Miles for different territories. Of course you can have any title or description you like. View the new sheet by clicking on it. We need to edit it, so click on Edit on the top right of the window. From the Assets pane on the left-hand side of the window, select Charts. Now drag and drop Scatterplot onto the sheet. A scatterplot shows points on a chart. Each point is a dimension and the chart axes correspond to measures. A scatterplot has one dimension and two measures. Click on Add Dimension and add territory name as the dimension. You can see it would have been slightly easier if we'd added territory name as a master item's dimension. For the first measure, select average roadways length miles from the list of measures. For the second measure, select average cars in use from the measures list. You should now have a chart that looks something like this on your computer. We need to do some customization to make the chart look the way that we want it to look. Rather than me tell you every single step, let's see if you can do these changes. Set the chart title to be Roadways, Cars and Territories. Set the number formatting on the axes to be 1000. The last thing we're going to do is to set the chart axes to start at 0. Here's how to change the axes range. Click on Appearance and on X-axis, and again you might have to scroll to see it. Change the range to Custom. Now, we could set the minimum value to anything we want, but the default here is 0, which is actually what we want. Do the same for the Y-axis, and again you'll have to scroll to see the settings. After these changes, you should see something like this. China and India are the obvious outliers on this chart, but the chart plots averages over time. If we look at the results for a year at a time, we see China moves from an outlier to the mainstream. This is due to the huge growth in car sales in China. India's position, however, does not change over time. So, how might you enable a user to see just 1 year's worth of data on this chart? This chart shows the territories of the world, and it would be good to look at just one region. Now, we can obviously do that using a filter, but we can do something a little bit better. Why don't we use a pie chart as a filter? That way we can display meaningful data and allow the user to select data by clicking on pie chart segments. Shrink the scatter plot to make some room on the right-hand side of the sheet. In the new space, drag and drop a pie chart. For the dimension, select OICA region, and for the measure, select roadways miles using sum as the aggregation. Turn off the dimension label and call the chart roadways by region. This is what your chart should look like. When we come out of edit mode, the pie chart segments will be clickable, allowing the user to select a region by clicking on a pie chart segment. Click Save. Tables. Charts are great visualizations, but what about tables? In many cases, our users want to see tables. So, let's add a table to show data all about the territories. Click on the navigation icon and choose App Overview. Click on Create a new sheet and add the title Territory Data and the description All About Territories. Edit the new sheet. Now drag and drop Table onto the sheet. Add territory name as the dimension. This gives us a list of all of the territories in our data model. Let's add some more columns to make the table more interesting. In the Properties pane under Column, you'll see Add Column. This will give us the option to add columns as a dimension or measure. Dimensions and measures will have slightly different options to customize the table appearance. Click on Add Column and Dimension, add territory code. In the same way, add OICA region as a dimension. Now we're going to add some measures. Click on Add Column and Measure. Add average roadway length miles as a measure. Similarly, add area kilometres squared, population and GDP as measures. By default, the table shows a totals row. Let's turn this off. Click on Appearance, Presentation. On Totals, click on Custom. Now, I changed the number formatting for the measures to remove decimal places, add a thousand separator, and I set the GDP number formatting to money. You can do those things yourself. Well, let's call this chart Territory Data. And here's how the top of the table looks on my machine. Click on Save. Consistent colours and good visual design. We're using territories in a number of charts on different sheets, but we're not colouring the territories consistently. For example, on the car sales by territory pie chart, China is purple. On the commercial vehicle sales pie chart, it's green, and on the cars, roadways and territory scatter plot, it's blue. Good visual design suggests that we use a consistent colour, but there's a problem. The most obvious colour scheme is to colour by territory, but we have over 200 territories, which would mean we would need over 200 colours. Now, I don't think I could easily differentiate between many of these 200 colours, and I'm not sure you could either. We have only 4 regions, so we could colour by region. Now, that would be consistent, add meaning, and be easy to understand. So we're going to do it. We're going to set the colour using an expression. An expression is some code that calls Qlik functions. The syntax of Qlik functions is straightforward, and the help provides a full list and examples. Let's create an expression that will return the colours that we want for the OICA regions. In pseudocode, we want something like this. Let's start with colour codes. Qlik Sense understands the official HTML colour codes, so we can use these names as our colours. Let's use spring green, light sky blue, violet, and light salmon. Rather than use nested if statements, which would work, we'll use a combination of the pick and match functions, which will make the expression easier to type in. The match function matches text and returns the index of the match. So this function returns 1 if OICA region is Africa, 2 if it's Americas, etc. An example pick function looks like this. When n equals 1, the function returns spring green. When n equals 2, it returns light sky blue, etc. So, putting the two functions together, we have this, which returns spring green when OICA region is Africa. This is the expression we'll use to colour our charts. To navigate quickly between sheets, you can use the arrow keys at the top of the sheet or use the sheet list on the top right of the window. Go to the vehicle sales sheet, click on Edit, and click on the car sales by territory pie chart. On the Properties pane, click on Appearance, and then click on Colours and Legend. Set the colours to custom and choose by expression from the drop-down menu. Make sure the box "The expression is a colour code" is ticked. Click on the function symbol under Expressions. Now this is going to bring up the Add Expression dialog. In Qlik Sense, an expression could be something simple, or it could be a very complex calculation involving a number of different fields. Qlik Sense has a wide range of built-in functions like pick and match, etc. to help build up expressions. The ability to define an expression gives us a lot of power to customize our visualizations. The expression editor allows us to create these expressions, and it will indicate if we've made a mistake and what it is. In the expressions editor, type in this expression. Here's what you should see in the window. The most important piece is the OK at the bottom left of the screen. If it's telling you error in expression, the most likely cause is incorrect brackets. If you've misspelled the colour names, they won't render correctly on the charts. Take a second to double check that you've copied the expression correctly and that your expression is OK. When you're sure it's OK, click on Apply. Here's how your chart should look now. Check that you've got the same colours on your screen. If some countries are grey, then you typed in the wrong colour name in the expression editor. We want to colour several charts by region, so once you're happy you've entered the correct expression, copy it using Ctrl+C. Now you're going to paste it into the other charts. Follow the same process I've just described now and change the colours on these charts. Commercial vehicle sales by territory on the vehicle sales sheet. Roadways, cars and territories on the cars, roadways, territory sheet. Roadways by region on the cars, roadways, territory sheet. Here's how the cars, roadways, territory sheet should look when you've finished. We've reused the same expression in 4 separate charts. Now, as an alternative, I could have defined a new field in our data model to hold the colour and use the field names as our expressions. Now that certainly would have simplified things, and it's an alternative to the approach that I've used here. If you look in the automotive application, you'll see an example of how I've used this technique. Click on Save. Gauges. Managers love gauges, and I like getting paid, so I like gauges too. We're going to put in a simple gauge to show car sales as a percentage of all vehicle sales. We'll define a new measure to hold the ratio of car sales to all vehicle sales. Click on the Master Items tab and click on Measures, and then Create New. We're going to define the ratio as an expression in the Create New Measures dialog. Type in this expression. I called my new measure Car Sales to All Sales Ratio. Here's what my complete Create New Measure dialog looks like. When you've entered everything correctly, click Create. Go to the Vehicle Sales sheet and drag the gauge icon from the Charts tab onto an empty space on the right of your sheet. Click on Add Measure. Select Car Sales to All Sales Ratio as your measure. Here's how your gauge should look. We're going to make it look much more impressive. First, let's set the scale right. Click on Appearance, then Presentation. Under Range Limits, set the max to 1. We want a bar rather than a radial presentation, so click on Bar. Under Measure Axes and Labels and Title, select Labels Only from the drop-down box. This suppresses the axes label that shows the name of our measure. We need to make the gauge show a percentage. Click on Measures and Car Sales to All Sales Ratio. Under Number Formatting, select Number from the drop-down box, and under Simple, select 12% from the drop-down box. Lastly, add the chart title Cars as a percentage of all vehicle sales. Your gauge should look like this. In the automotive app, I've taken this one stage further and used colours to make my gauge more appealing. You can investigate how I did that by opening the app and examining the gauge settings. Click on Save. Text and images. We'll end on something fun and light-hearted. We're going to add images and some text. Let's start by adding a title sheet with a background image and a title. To create the new sheet, go to the App Overview and Create New Sheet. Give the new sheet the title Introduction. On the screen, click on your new introduction sheet and drag it so it's the first sheet in the application. Now click on the introduction sheet to view it. The sheet is empty, so click on Edit to edit it. From the Charts tab, drag the text and image icon onto the screen. We want it to fill the entire sheet. Now click on the plus sign where it says Click to add text and measures. You'll see this menu appear at the top of the chart. Now the controls are very similar to the edit controls in other software. Type the text Auto Industry Analysis Application. So let's see if you can make the text extra large, bold, and centered on the sheet. I want an image in the background, so in the Properties pane, click on Appearance, then Background Image. Set Use Background Image to On and click on Select an Image. This opens up a dialog box that lets us navigate through a set of image folders. The images we'll be using are here in the Auto folder. Select the autos.png image and click on Apply. Clicking Apply takes us back to the sheet. Now we need to position the image a bit better. On Sizing, select Stretch to Fit. Here's how your screen should look now. Click Save. We're now going to add a company logo to the bottom of the vehicle sales chart. Move to the vehicle sales chart and drag and drop text and image to the bottom right of the sheet. Click where it says Click to add text and measures. This will bring up the same menu as before. This time, click on the right-hand icon, Insert an Image. This brings up the same image selection dialog as before. Find the Auto folder and select Qlik Logo RGB. Click on Apply. Here's how it should appear on your chart. Now click Save. The last thing we're going to do is to give our application a thumbnail. To do this, we need to go back to the App Overview. Your App Overview should look something like this. click on the little eye symbol to show information about the application. You should see something like this. On the right-hand side of the window, you'll see a pencil icon, which is the edit icon for the app description. Click on the edit icon. This will enable us to edit the app title, description, and thumbnail. On the left of the screen, you'll see the application thumbnail with a small camera image embedded. The application thumbnail is the default one. We're going to replace it with a thumbnail I created earlier. Click on the camera icon. Once again, this puts us in the image selection dialog. Find the auto folder and select autologo.png. Click Apply. This shows us the new icon on the app overview. Click Save. Next time you start Qlik Sense, your new logo will show up. Here's what you should see in the hub. Your application is auto, and it's the one with the yellow van. So congratulations! You've now built a full-blown Qlik Sense application. Let's summarize what you've done. You've taken data from multiple data sources and combined them into one data model. You've edited the underlying data to add fields, delete fields, and rename fields. You've created a new Qlik Sense application with several sheets and charts. You've created the following charts: pie charts, line charts, bar charts, scatter plots, gauges, text and image, filters and tables. Mobile development. Can you resize the window? If so, you can do mobile development on Qlik Sense. Open your brand new auto application. The application looks great on a desktop computer, but how would it look on a tablet or a phone? Qlik Sense automatically and intelligently resizes charts to make the best use of available screen real estate. As we shrink the window, it will turn off axes displays and use other techniques to preserve as much meaning as possible on a small window. To see resizing in action, click on the bottom right of the window to shrink it to roughly the size of a tablet screen. Let's shrink it down to roughly the size of a phone display. Qlik Sense now rearranges the charts. They're all still there, but they've just been rearranged to fit on the smaller phone screen size. Building mobile apps just became a lot easier. We can build our own apps on the desktop and see how they would look on a mobile device just by resizing the window. This brings us to the end of the tutorial. If you haven't already done so, you can download the tutorial content from this website. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.